Okay, so yes, welcome to this session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah and I'm one of the counsellors for IEC. And obviously with the start of the academic year fast approaching, we understand, both myself and all of the team at IEC, we know this is a nerve-wracking time of year, regardless of the current situation. And of course, with COVID, it has amplified things. And we know that for both students and parents, you must have a lot of questions in terms of how the academic year will take shape. For that reason, we thought it'd be a good idea to organise a Q&A session with some of our representatives at universities to try and help reassure you about the kind of policies and protocols that they're planning to implement for the arrival this year. Okay. So in terms of the partners that we have with us today, the representatives, we have Warwick, Exeter, Southampton, Lancaster and Nottingham University. And they'll, as I say, they'll be speaking about what they're currently preparing, but this could also be slightly subject to change. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to invite all of your universities. I know some of you are watching this to kind of have an idea of some of the things that are being done by other universities to give you a better idea. But we've deliberately chosen universities kind of across the UK to give you an idea of how things are being handled throughout the country. Okay, so we're going to start with the north of the UK. So we have Dada from Lancaster University, and give us a wave, who will be joining us today. We then have in the Midlands Stephen Soames from University of Warwick. We have Jelena Markovic from the University of Nottingham. And then finally, so Stephen and Jelena from the Midlands for both University of Warwick and University of Nottingham. And then finally in the south of the UK, we have Josie Love from University of Southampton, and then Taylor Wern from University of Exeter. Okay, so these are representatives who we have with us today. And then in terms of the structure of this session, my colleagues and I have planned questions, so commonly asked questions that we get asked a lot. Just to give you a better idea of how things will take shape this year. Some of you have also sent us some questions directly, either by a form that you filled in or you've asked us directly in a session. So we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Also, whilst the session will be predominantly conducted in English, if you do have a question in Spanish that you want to ask us, please feel free to type it in the chat section and we can ask that question as well. I can translate it to the representatives. Also, if you have any want any clarifications after the session, please feel free to ask me or the member of the team, and we'll happily go over it with you. Okay, so we will get started with the Q&A session now. We'll also have a couple of questions in particular where all the reps will be answering. So these will be key questions that we know that all of you want to know, to have an idea of what the reps are doing currently or what the unis are doing currently to manage the arrival of students in September. So the first question that we have is related to safety. Obviously a key thing that the universities are dedicating a hell of a lot of time to prepare for students arriving. And of course, students want to know, what are the safety measures that your universities are having on campus? I'm directing this directly to the reps now. So what are the safety measures that you have on campus? And also, can you give us an idea of what your feeling is in the UK, how things are progressing in the UK with regards to COVID? So I'm going to choose a first. Let's think, who should I choose first? Josie, would you mind answering this question first for me?
Yeah, so hello everybody, I'm Josie, I'm in Southampton. It is not sunny, but it should be because it is July. So a little bit about the UK in general, and it would be great to know what my counterparts at other unis think. But I mean, the trend is good. The trend of cases and unfortunately deaths is on its way down. The situation is changing every day. We've just found out that we will now be wearing face masks when we go to shops from the 24th of July. Things are rapidly evolving, as I'm sure they are where you are too. So it is something that as an institution we are keeping a very, very close eye on, so that we're able to give the right information to students, but also prepare for that new academic year. And I'm sure my colleagues will agree that this is not a small feat, trying to work out how we're going to keep students safe. But a couple of measures that we have brought in at Southampton The first one is that we're actually staggering our start. So a lot of our postgraduate students are actually going to now be coming in January. And the idea really was just to reduce the number of students on campus so that our undergrads arriving in September are able to continue to attend classes, small classes, without having to worry about having lots and lots of people on campus. So we're able to kind of adhere to some of that social distancing. A lot of our big classes and our bigger lectures will be online, and we'll combine those with face-to-face teaching in things like labs and small group tutorials, again, adhering to social distancing. In addition to that, we've been mapping accommodation and making sure that we're able to provide accommodation that is safe and secure. And if students were to have to isolate when they arrive, and thankfully at the moment, students from Spain don't have to, and hopefully that'll stay the same. But if you were to have to do that, then we would be able to look after you and make sure that you would be having somewhere safe to stay, and that you would be looked after and you'd know what to do when you arrived. And then the other thing we're looking at is how to actually get you from the airport to the university in the first place. So as soon as you step foot in the UK, the plan is to get you to Southampton and make sure that you arrive safely and that you are absolutely informed about what things will look like once you get there. So that's kind of what we're working on. I have to say it is evolving. This is such a big and complex. The more you think about it, the more anxiety inducing it gets when you think about how many students you're talking about, where they're coming from. But we are working on it, and we are working flat out to make sure we have all of those things in place. When you arrive, it really is safe and you can get on with your studies.
Perfect, thank you very much. Taylor, could you tell us a little bit about how Exeter are preparing?
Yeah, certainly. So hi everyone, thanks for joining us this morning. So I'm Taylor from University of Exeter. And actually just following on from what Josie said, you know, lots of universities across the UK will have very similar procedures being implemented. So some of what I'll highlight, you know, is similar to what Josie was saying for Southampton. But in terms of what it will mean in practice for students arriving on our campus in the autumn, well, you know, how will we run our buildings safely, etc. At the moment, there's a team of approximately 20 surveyors going around all of our campuses. We have 3 campuses in the southwest. On our Streatham campus in Exeter, for example, there are 69 different buildings, and the surveyors are ensuring to make sure that they're safe in terms of ventilation, etc., signage, making sure that the spacing when students are there will be sort of appropriate, and that the right cleaning sort of procedures are going to be in place. Only once all of those boxes are ticked will the buildings be open and as safe as possible for students. Sort of in addition to that, we'll have sort of hand sanitizer available at all the entrances and sort of exits, hand washing facilities, and then increased cleaning as you would expect, and also sort of safe distancing instructions for where you might have a shared kitchen in shared spaces at the university. What also, Josie said this as well, so, but we've also going to introduce the January start for a lot of our PGT postgraduate courses as an option, and that will again reduce the numbers of students on our campus because we will be operating at a reduced capacity. And then additionally to that, face coverings and digital thermometers will be made available for free to all students and staff to ensure that students who are coming onto the campus will be able to feel safe. You know, we'll have a face covering to wear, and also there'll be a procedure for sort of temperature checks on the campus to ensure sort of maximum safety, really. So those are a few of the sort of key things, and we'll cover more sort of later on in some of the other questions, I'm sure.
Perfect, thank you very much. Matty, can you tell me about what you're planning at Lancaster, please?
Yep, thank you very much. So my name's Mutty from Lancaster University. Very, very similar to what other universities are thinking about. Recently, there was that change in terms of looking at a 2-meter distance to reduce that to 1. And that made things a little bit more flexible in terms of the type of experience that we can kind of enhance on the campus, which means more people being allowed into our bigger lecture theatres, more people on campus. But similarly, in terms of that infrastructure, we want that campus experience to be the best possible and for students to be able to interact with other students, to be able to meet with their lecturers, but to do it in a way that is socially responsible and is kind of in guidance with Public Health England. So that would mean one-way direction around buildings, similarly hand sanitizers at entrances. It would mean face masks in places where you're at close proximity. So similar places to, we have famously talk about having a Greg's Bakery on campus. So when you are queuing up and buying your lunch, that you're able to do so in a safe and in a responsible way. In terms of accommodation, similar preparations, we want to make sure that we're not making people come together at the same time in a very quick fashion. So we will stagger and separate out our arrivals. So students will be given a time frame to arrive within. So that normally would have been a weekend, but at the moment that will extend across a week, 2 week period. So things like that, that will make sure that we're kind of being as responsible as possible. Another thing that's been quite interesting that we've been looking at is to be treating each accommodation flat like a household, so that there is that kind of flexibility to be able to interact and just to have the best normal on-campus experience. But I think the questions that I get quite a lot also that relate to this, what kind of opportunities that am I going to be missing out on? Hopefully nothing, because we want to be able to make sure that students are interacting with other students, whether that's societies, meeting with their lecturers, making sure that the class sizes are reduced. So that might mean we put on 2 sessions instead of the 1, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to meet with your lecturers, meet with other students, and it's not planning that we would have everything online at all. And that's what we mean by a blended model, that we would have a combination of both approaches so that students get the best kind of quality experience, but with a primary focus on safety, really, to make sure that we're keeping our distance and being responsible. Thank you.
Perfect. No, thank you. That's really good. And I think it's very true, as you said, that really the universities are preparing to deliver that experience that you've worked hard for this past year. I think that's very, very true. Stephen, could you tell us about Warwick, please?
Yeah, so you'll probably notice some similarities in what we're saying here. Now, Universities UK last month put out a poll, and 97% of all UK universities have this blended approach. So I think you'll probably see there is some similarity in what we're saying. You know, we're actually doing very similar things to Southampton, Exeter, and to Lancaster in many ways. One thing to note as well is that many of us have got campus universities, which means that we have a space that we can manage. Now, of course, there are UK-wide guidelines, which all of us will be adhering to. So in public spaces, and this goes for our cafes, for our arts centre, for society events, we're all of us going to have to adhere to UK national guidelines. But within our own campuses, we can also manage this space. So Taylor's mentioned sanitising stations. We'll have PPE, so face masks and similar to keep people safe. And I think Mutty also mentioned that you've got then accommodation, which you can manage as a block. So we have halls of residence where we can have a bubble where you can socialise locally. And then beyond that, you've got these public spaces. So your lectures, your cafes, your society events, where you're going to be in that case much more in line with what the UK as a whole is doing. So it doesn't matter if you're in a cafe in the middle of a big city like London, or in a cafe on, you know, Southampton's campus or Nottingham's campus or Warwick's. In each case, you know, that's going to be the same socially distanced experience that you'll have there. We are, as I say, managed spaces that we have. You know, our campus is 24/7 managed as a space. You have cleaning happening anyway, of course. So the halls of residence have always been cleaned. We're going to be stepping up those arrangements. So the plan at the moment is for additional deep cleaning, more regular cleaning, so that it's fully sanitised. But as Mutty said, in other respects, it's going to be the standard experience, just modified to this reality that we're now in, calibrated to the norm. So of course, you have to watch the public health advice as it develops. We are, of course, concerned that there could be a second wave, in which case we may have to adapt a little bit further. But, you know, that's going to be in line with anywhere you'll be living, whether that's Spain or the UK. So that's what I would add.
That's great, thank you. And now, Yelena, if you could tell us a little bit about Nottingham as well. So I know that everyone's probably covered a lot at this point, but anything you can add just to let us know about what you're planning?
Ours isn't really dissimilar to what's been said already. As Stephen said, I think most universities are going for the blended learning approach, and we're no different. So our larger lectures will be online. They will still be interactive, and there'll be a lot of communication with the lecturers as well. So it won't just be students listening to lectures, if they are interactive sessions. This frees up some of the larger spaces on campus for the socially distancing of the smaller groups, such as the tutorials, seminars, labs, workshops. So yeah, so that will definitely be the way the first semester will go. In terms of other spaces, so some of our buildings are already open. There's one-way systems where possible. Where not, and there's two-way systems, then it's a one person at a time rule. And there's plenty of signage around advising students what to do. Lab spaces are one-way systems again, so students can still access all the areas. You know, they just have to go a certain controlled way around. And some of the places have been decommissioned or put out of use to make it safer. Accommodation is, again, as others have said, there's enhanced cleaning there. There'll be hand sanitizers. Where we have the catered accommodation, student will be able to access their meals contactless, so they don't need to come into contact with people. Again, we're making provisions as well for those countries, students from those countries that need to quarantine when they arrive in the UK. And fortunately, or hopefully, Spain won't be one of those. I know a number of students are concerned about socialising and getting the student experience. And as others have said, we are working, the University and the Students' Union are working with the societies to try and enhance that experience. And some activities will be online, but there will hopefully be in-person sessions as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so with all of you really, really getting prepared for students arriving, and I like the fact that obviously, although we speak about safety, you're also very much stressing, as I said before, the student experience. You know, you are trying to maintain it as much as possible to guarantee that not just the safety side, but even well-being side, being able to make friends and still do different activities. You know, the universities are preparing for that as well, which is excellent. So I'm going on to kind of a different kind of topic, slightly, a different section is obviously things like Freshers Week and arrivals. So many students want to know, how is the Welcome Week going to take shape? Some of you have already said this in terms of, I know maybe postgraduates being staggered until January, for example, but for students arriving on your campus, how are you planning that? I know that anyway, quite a lot of universities will stagger students' arrivals any year, but for this year, how are you planning to do that? And also, do you think you'll have any in-person activities, or are you planning any online activities for students to do? This time, I will start with Stephen, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So we have a Welcome Week, which was introduced about 3 years ago. Before then, you just started your course and learned as you went along, whereas now we have a full week for everybody to come to campus. We had over 1,000 events in 7 days last year. So this is everything from, you know, cycling around campus, freshers fairs, volunteering fairs, and we're going to continue doing that this year. Of course, we are going to have to adapt how some of those bigger events look and how they work. Some of our events will move online, and you can actually see, if you go onto some of the Facebook pages, what happened in term 3, because this gives you an indication of what our careers events might look like, you know, what societies are already doing with online events. But where we can, we will of course have, you know, activities for students to get involved. We've got 700 acres of space outside for you to explore. So you know, hockey pitches, football pitches, tennis courts, you know, all of this stuff is there, you know, outside where you can do this more safely. There are some things still to be confirmed, so we haven't yet had definitive detail on what the transfer arrangements will look like. They are under discussion, they are actively being considered, and we have had that in previous years. And that's previously been a from Heathrow Airport, or, and I would recommend this option, from Birmingham Airport, which is 20 minutes away, it's much closer. So there are still points of detail that we'll need to confirm with you, but we're going to have live chats, we're going to have webinars, pre-departures, so you can get all of that detail too.
Perfect, thank you very much. And Yelena, can you tell me about Nottingham, what you're planning for Welcome Week? 1 second, I think the audio is not on. There you go. Got it.
So our Welcome Week details haven't been completely finalised yet. We are planning to do some in-person activities as well. That's what we're working towards. But some will inevitably be online. We're hoping to offer taster sessions for all the clubs, if not in person, then online. And also in terms of sorry, I forgot what I was going to say then. Sports facilities. So we are planning for all our 4 sports facilities to be open in September when term starts. Some of these perhaps won't be accessible, but certainly our outdoor pitches and some of the courts indoors as well will be accessible. So obviously everything will be done with a view to the safety of the students and staff. Again, the pickup arrangements haven't been finalised yet. We're sort of looking at when students are likely to be arriving before we set up firm dates. But we do have a sort of welcome area of the website, which is accessible from the home page, which will be updated as and when all these arrangements are made and finalised.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Taylor, can you tell us about Exeter, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's similar to other universities, as I'll probably repeat at the beginning of each of my answers. But yeah, so our Students Guild and our Students Union in our Cornwall campuses will be running sort of a range of different activities. Yes, at the moment, most of those activities are being planned for online. The reason for that is because, as I mentioned in my previous answer, actually, we don't yet know which buildings are going to be open at which dates. And so once we know that, then we can start to plan what capacity we have for in-person events. One thing we're very lucky with in Exeter and the Southwest, indeed with our campuses, is the amount of open space that we have. So, socially distanced and safe sort of outdoor activities will definitely take place where it's sort of safe and possible to do so. So I've been in touch with our Students Guild this week to sort of find out what they're planning. And one of the things that they sort of are stressing is that whilst lots of activities will be online, it'll be like the teaching model, and that's a bit of a blended approach. So some of the ones that are likely to happen in person might be things like a socially distanced meet the committee and sort of meet up with new members and existing members. It might be a socially distant sort of fitness class or a Zumba class. And then outside of that, many of our societies sort of take advantage of the coast that we have nearby. So our sort of surfing society and our outdoor water sports societies, lend themselves really to being outdoors and to being able to keep apart and at a safe distance. So a number of those things will be going ahead in any case. So those are the key things really. I'd encourage anyone interested in Exeter just to have a look at our Student Guild website, which again is accessible through our webpage. Just type in Students Guild, and there'll be announcements coming in sort of a month when things are clearer. But as we know, things are changing rapidly. Could be sooner than that, could be slightly later. But just keep up to date with all of our university web pages to see if there are any changes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And now Josie, if you could tell us about Southampton, please.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be very, very similar in terms of Southampton and other unis. I mean, I wanted to highlight that we've kind of had a term's head start. So obviously the last term of this year, we were at a distance, and our societies have continued to, operate, albeit in a different way. And a lot of our fitness classes moved online, and you could log in and still do yoga and Zumba, as Taylor mentioned. So we have been practicing this. So even if things are online, it's still going to be a really nice experience. And touch wood, it won't be forever. So while your Welcome Week this year might not quite feel how perhaps friends have reported previously, you get another one next year and the year after that too. So there are ways to kind of make up for that if you feel like you've maybe missed the full sense of a Welcome Week. But with that in mind, we're working really hard with our student union to look at ways that our students can really make the most of that. And a lot of stuff will actually be done before you arrive. So we're looking at you know, making sure our students are already enrolled before they're even on campus, so that's already done. You can set up your IT account before you arrive. All of those kind of technical bits can all be done remotely. We will be running some pre-departure sessions, and in that I'll be talking all about the EU settlement scheme, so you can kind of get all of that stuff ready before you come, so that you can then make the most of the various different options that we're offering in Welcome Week. So, you know, I think it'll be a really nice experience, even if it's not quite what you pictured for this year.
Perfect, thank you. And then, Matti, if you can tell us about Lancaster, please.
Thank you. I'd just reiterate what colleagues have said from other universities, really. We want to make sure students get access to those opportunities to be able to meet with other students, whether that be in smaller groups rather than bigger groups. Sports facilities, I think Joanna touched on this really, really importantly. I think some students are concerned, will I still be able to exercise? Will I still be able to access those facilities? And it's very important that the government regulations only recently relaxed and we are now putting into place. So it may look a little bit different in certain facilities being closed or certain being open or being separated out when you are in the gym. But we will be opening those facilities in the next coming days. So that's a really positive as well, to make sure that you've got access to those, particularly from a sports and societies point of view. I think the other things that I think about when I think about Welcome Week, it's also about registering with the health service. So that will still be a very important factor and part of that process in that first week. Meeting with your tutors, choosing your elective modules. That's a really important one as well at Lancaster, because the first year allows you to pick certain selections from other parts of the university. So you'll still get access to be able to do that. And also, more importantly, about looking for part-time jobs as well. And our career service has an online portal, so there won't be that specific need to go out and rush to go to the office. You can still do that online as well when you're looking for those kind of short-term work opportunities at Lancaster. So just to reiterate, all of those opportunities that you would be looking to access in Welcome Week will be available, just in a different form or in smaller groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that's given us an idea then about safety, Welcome Week. And then another key question is how things are going to work with the online teaching. We've actually had a message from Monica on our chat. So what are the plans related to online versus face-to-face delivery classes? So yes, in terms of online learning, so in answer to that question, what are the plans for this? And I think for a lot of students, they want to kind of know how the online classes will merge with the in-person classes. Will there be, if you like, an interaction between the two? Will they be seen as very, very separate? Josie, could you talk to us about this for Southampton, please?
So I guess the first thing to say is it will depend on what you're studying. So the model of teaching will vary depending on what you're studying anyway. So if you were doing a degree in marketing, you were probably likely to spend your first year in quite big classes or big groups. You wouldn't necessarily have those really tiny lab teams that you might have in something like engineering or biomedical science. How it works kind of in your first year is that you have those big lectures, and that could be, I don't know, 300 people maximum potentially. And that would then filter down into your seminars and into your tutorials, where you would go over that content in greater depth and you'd have the opportunity to discuss it. So that's how it works. And the idea with blended learning is you'll have exactly the same process. So you'll have those big lectures where you are taking notes, where you're asking questions, but then you will be able to take what you've learned and discuss it in greater depth in those smaller groups and in face-to-face. So that's the idea. So that will work essentially the same way. The balance, again, of how much of your course will be online and how much will be face-to-face, again, really depends on your course and the size of the number of students and how technical you need to get within your course. I know that in the second semester of this year, we did a lot of the online modules that were feasibly taught online. So the things where you really needed face-to-face, we kind of had moved to the next year. This is for students who are continuing. So I would hope that our academic community is being fairly flexible and thinking, well, actually, this is a realistic one that can be taught online, and maybe we'll kind of move things around ever so slightly, but ultimately you'll still be getting that blend of you know, big lectures and then the opportunity to discuss those in greater depth, which is what you would have got anyway. It's just some of it will be on a screen.
Perfect, thank you. I think that's really reassured. That will have really reassured students. It is true. I know from, you know, having studied in the UK myself, that seminars are very much in place anyway before coronavirus for you to look at things in more detail, to be able to ask questions to your teachers, to also maybe work on things with other students. So you're absolutely right. It is really a change in format, maybe rather than a change in the learning. I definitely think that's the case. Does anyone else have anything to add in terms of online learning? I imagine this would be quite similar, where it will depend quite a lot on your course and the capacity that the course has to offer a lot of classes online. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I would just add to that I could see that there was a question about what percentage of classes might be online, and I think colleagues would agree with me, like very much depending on the course, but universities will be planning from anywhere between 0 online delivery to a 100% online delivery, depending on the course. So it's very difficult to say at the moment what percentage would be online, because it very much depends what your course is, how long your course is, where it's taught, etc. So, just to bear in mind that universities will, with their sort of teams working on this, will be planning for all of the eventualities there, and doing whatever's safe. The safest option will sort of be the one that they go with.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to have another look. Is there any more comments just to check? Anything else? Yes, please add.
Yeah, so I just saw a comment come in from Monica just about business, and I actually had the lesson plan from business school yesterday, so I know what ours might look like. At the moment, and there is obviously a provisional sense to this, and we have to add that caveat. There's a 1-1-1 model, so you get a 1 hour of lecture, 1 hour of face-to-face seminar, and then 1 hour of teaching, of assessment, which will be available online. And you've then got 2 streams. So you've got those that can't physically get to campus, where it will be 100% online. So there's a group there that will have online forums. And then you've got campus teaching, where with groups of up to 25, we can give you that seminar experience as you would always have had. It just means that we have to divide up into smaller groups, which is potentially to your advantage. It's probably what we'd have taught anyway, but you've basically got the same in that respect. But with seminars, you've also then got, as always, different groups that will be separate. So that's much the same as any other year in that respect. But we're looking at ways for both synchronous and asynchronous teaching. So some of this will be live lectures where you're actually watching in time. In other cases, we'll be chunking up those lectures into smaller gobbets almost, where you can access it in discrete chunks. And there are potentially advantages to this, because the human attention span isn't really 1 hour, it's normally 10 minutes, which means you can watch this in your own time and process what you're listening to at your own speed.
Perfect, thank you very much. And also, just quickly to the other reps, if you do see a question related to, on the chat, please feel free to also go straight in and comment on that as well. Okay, so I think that's covered a lot in terms of online classes. Unless anyone else has anything else to add, please speak now. If not, we can revisit that later. But another question that is important to know is a question from John, and he's asked, what would the protocol be if a student came down with COVID-19 in a shared flat on campus? And I know this particular applicant, so his daughter will be going to Lancaster, so I am going to pass this directly to Matti for this particular question.
Thank you very much. So at Lancaster, I hope that wasn't just me who could hear that.
Don't worry, it's fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. So you might be aware that at Lancaster we're a collegiate university, and that gives us some additional structure in terms of support and kind of taking care of our students. So coming to Lancaster as an undergraduate student, you would be one of the 8 colleges, and your college would have a support structure and a team and staff that are there 24 hours a day, really. So I think that kind of element of being on a big campus sometimes can feel quite daunting, but one of the key reasons students say that they quite like being at Lancaster is because they feel like that they're part of a little family and a little home. And I think that's the kind of community message and that support message around this particularly, I think, is really important, because there are so many points of contact if there is any concern or if there's anything that we're worried about. We at present have 1,500 students on campus already. So it's something that we're very, very well versed with. And although the universities will be practicing to kind of, if we have to, unfortunately, possibly have to deal with this in the future, that we are trying to do what we can in terms of isolating students if they need to, if there's a concern, provide them with the support, the emotional and the physical. So making sure that we're checking up on them and giving them any resources, food or anything like that they might need. Relaying, because we have a COVID test centre within Lancaster, so making sure that those arrangements are made, and to kind of keep students in isolation and kind of notify students around that. So just small things like having WhatsApp groups. So for those students that are in their accommodation hubs right now, they're looking after each other, they're keeping in touch with each other, sharing what they're cooking, sharing their resources together. And we also, for those students who are unable to leave campus, we also provide free of charge a resource food pack within the kitchens as well, so that there isn't, nobody kind of struggles or feels like that they're going without in any way. So the supportive element, if we do have to deal with anything kind of unfortunate, we'll 100% be there, and you'd be able to relay with the college directly as a parent or as a concerned named person to make sure that your loved one is okay as well. But yeah, we unfortunately hope that that doesn't happen really. But if it does happen, we need to make sure that we're well prepared to look after your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This kind of ties in with another question that we have from Luis Sanchez de Leon, where he asks about confinement and if there's a plan for supply and attention, which you've completely covered. Does any other university have any comments on that, about what you're planning? Will it be something quite similar? Any other comments? I mean, I think, to be honest, that does seem very detailed in terms of what you're planning to do. What would be the situation if I can ask for the people who live with someone who has COVID? Would they also need to be limiting how much they leave the flat? Could you tell me about that, please?
That would be defined by kind of the accommodation circumstance. So if we are in a flat and that is one bubble, that is one kind of household, is how we're looking at defining that, so that it would have kind of a limited impact really. So then in terms of the advice, we would really need to follow Public Health England, and at this moment in time, that would mean an isolation period of anybody that has come in contact with anybody that has been suspected of a period of 2 weeks. So then we would make arrangements around supporting students through that. We would obviously work through the accommodation teams versus academic, and that's why this blended model is really important, that we're making sure that the learning outcomes are met and students are still getting the same opportunities to be able to get their accreditation where needed, to be able to get access to course materials, and that's where the blended model becomes really important. And then in hopefully after 2 weeks, they would be back within the kind of normal daily practice on campus.
So this is going to lead me on to our next question, still on the health side. So we've got a question from Lucia Guedan asking if EU students will be covered by medical insurance, so with their e-HIT card, for example. So yeah, if someone could tell us a little bit about that, the current situation, also how that could potentially change. Taylor, could you speak with us about this?
Yeah, so my understanding of, and just to caveat this, I did a little bit of research on this prior to this, so I'm not an expert, but this is my understanding from having spoken with our colleagues in international student support. But if you're an EU student, then you're exempt from being charged either if you have a European health insurance card. Our student support team are very keen to stress that may change from the 1st of January. Or secondly, if you've applied under the EU settlement scheme and you're what's called ordinarily resident in the UK, and there's information about what that is in practice, but it really means that you're living here for reasons other than study. So that's my understanding, that on those two counts you would be exempt, but outside of that, then there would be a sort of immigration sort of surcharge. I think colleagues, I mean, there's a bit of nodding going on, so hopefully that's fairly correct.
I can, if it's all right, I'll build on that.
Yeah.
So the EU settlement scheme is falling under my remit at Southampton, so hopefully we'll get this right, or something's gone very wrong. Yes, so when you arrive, As long as you are here by the 31st of December, you will be eligible to apply for the EU settlement scheme, which is a completely free scheme to apply for, and it's all online. And this is the one that at Southampton we're going to tell you about before you arrive, so you can get ready. The EU settlement scheme will protect your rights to live, work, study, access healthcare in the UK once the transition period finishes on the 31st of December, which is where that date comes from. You have until the 30th of June to apply for that, but really you should do it as soon as you can. And as a new arrival in the UK, you will get pre-settled status, and pre-settled status will mean that you can continue to access NHS care. So this is something that's really, really important to have on your radar when you arrive, and your universities will have support systems and information to help you to make sure that you've got your application done, because we recognise that, you know, this really, really does mean the difference between having to take out insurance and other things, and we don't want you to have to do that. So as long as you make sure you've registered for that by the deadline, your NHS cover will continue to be covered after the end of the transition period in December.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm just going to see some more questions that we have here. 1 second. Okay, we have one question from Clara Riero, who just wants to check to confirm, obviously with all the changes with Brexit, so what will happen with the student fees? So will EU students pay the same fees as UK students from 2020 until the end of the course they are taking? So just want to check that they'll continue to pay the same from 2020 to 2023 or whenever their course ends. Anyone answer this one?
Yes, as long as they don't change course. So this is for if you're coming in as an undergrad and you've got your UCAS code, your course needs to keep the same UCAS code. So if you were to move to a different course, then that would mean that it wasn't the duration of your studies and you'd essentially be starting again. So if after the first year of French this year you switch to biomedical science next year, that would be a different course and that guarantee wouldn't be in place. So you need to make sure that you are staying on the same course. If it's an integrated foundation year, and the university will be able to confirm what the fee situation is for that, then that should also be covered. But again, if you were completing a standalone foundation year and then joining a course, you wouldn't be eligible for the EU fees or the EU loan. And it also covers the academic year. So if your course has been moved to January, you will still be eligible for that fee and that loan at EU rate for your course. So it's as long as you're enrolling within that academic year. But you wouldn't necessarily be eligible for the pre-settlement scheme if you didn't arrive before the 31st of December. So that's the catch. But I'm sure IUC will be able to help you with that if you've got any questions.
Definitely. Actually, speaking about, you know, dates of arrival, we have a question from Jaime who wanted to check if the start dates at universities will remain the same. Are you currently planning for the same arrival dates for undergraduates? Yelena, could you tell us, speak about that for Nottingham, please?
Yes, our autumn term is planning to start on the 21st of September as expected, as we were planning originally, so that's not changed. In terms of arrivals, normally our arrivals would happen sort of the weekend before that, but this year we're having more of a staggered approach. So again, that's not definitely being confirmed dates, whatever, but that will be notified to offer holders and to on our website as well. But yes, we will definitely be starting in September.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else for that, or is it all the same for all of you, your universities? I've got some nodding of heads.
I found out yesterday that our term will start on the 5th of October, which is a week later than we'd originally planned. That decision has only just been made. So we will be communicating with our students as to what that means. But we're looking at the 5th of October for a start date. And there is an expectation that students will be on campus. They may not be able to be there by the 5th, but it isn't going to be an online provision. And unfortunately, we're not able to run, unlike Warwick, we can't run 2 streams. There won't be full online and on campus. There will be a blended model, which involves students coming to campus.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just another question, will the answers to these questions be available offline after the event finishes? What we'll do is we'll send the recording and I'll speak with my colleagues in terms of how we can get these answers to you as well, so you've got it in written form. Another question actually that we've been asked is if this year your universities will provide any greater flexibility with regard to the grade requirement. This could be quite generally also, I know from having spoken to several of you that with the IB, we have seen a very unusual year in terms of grades, but not just for the IB. Will your universities be taking into account if a student doesn't quite make the grade? How much flexibility can you give? Matti, can you answer this, please, to begin with?
It's one of the most challenging ones as a question, because it's such a contextual answer that I have to give, really. I've worked in the industry for 15 years. I've looked after clearing every year since I've been working in education. And that process, we know, is about matching students to kind of courses that don't have as many applicants versus kind of supply and demand. And the same applies when we're confirming students as well. And I think you'll read a lot about this from various sources. So what we have to take into consideration is kind of where we're at with that course in terms of the requirements versus the number of applications versus the likelihood of students converting. Now, the metric this year for many universities will be off, because it's a calculated kind of approach, really, to try to figure out what is going to be the most likely case scenario for our intake in October. So taking all of this into consideration, the admissions team will be as flexible as they can be, but there will be certain places where flexibility will be very unlikely. So for Lancaster this year, our courses that have been heavily oversubscribed have included things like psychology, our law program with study abroad, our BBA program in Spain, which you're very familiar with. It's very, very popular. So those courses will exercise very, very little flexibility, whereas other courses you might kind of see. So, but that is our job as university representatives, is to guide you in terms of what is likely and what is not likely. So at this time, I have to recommend that you get in touch as soon as you have your results, and let us work with IEC and give you the best advice possible as quickly as possible, really. So I think the formal line is we will be as flexible as we can be at Lancaster, taking into account the kind of disappointment in IB grades, the kind of difficult circumstances around the world, but it will be on an individual basis, trying to take in as much as personal information that we can take into consideration. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. Any other answers to this question, or has Matti pretty much covered it? Yeah, perfect, thank you. I've seen a couple of questions as well that are slightly more specific. So I am going to send a couple of private messages to a couple of students just so that I can know a little bit more about their situation. But in the meantime, let me have a look at any other questions that we have. So that about the entry dates. Any other questions you have, please feel free to type now. We will be finishing the session in around 10 minutes, but in the meantime, I will be sending a quick private message on one of the questions just to know a little bit more about the student's particular circumstance. In the meantime, we've covered grades, so entry requirements. Also, another thing, I know that some of your universities, you have been more lenient in terms of accepting different English requirements, which is quite a big change after traditionally not offering a lot of flexibility with this. Just to check, how long do students have to get their English language requirement, for example, at Warwick? What's the deadline for students to have that, please?
Yeah, so it can be quite close to the course start date. So, you know, we go into August and you're fine with English language. So you have got time at the moment. We've got the pre-sessional, we're offering Duolingo, we're offering obviously IELTS as normal, but also TOEFL, IBT, Special Online Edition. So these sorts of tests you can take, you know, much closer to the time. That's absolutely fine.
Perfect, thank you very much. Any other questions that anyone has? No, I think this session has really helped. I really hope you found this session helpful to reassure you to know that these people are working very, very hard to ensure your safe arrival in the UK. With things like the safety procedure, some of these things will of course be subject to change, but a lot of the methods in terms of assuring the 2-meter distance, for example, maybe some one-way systems, for example, in a library, these will stay in place. I think I saw a message as well about things like temperature checks, and if I remember correctly, Taylor, you mentioned temperature checks. I think this could be something that you will be doing maybe throughout your campuses, but it does seem that you do have a lot in place ready for students arriving. We've got one more question, well, two actually, sorry. Is there another Q&A session planned? I think we'll see how things progress. I mean, from IC's perspective, I'm sure from your perspective, we would love to. So we'll see how things go, we'll see how things progress. And if this is something we can arrange, you know, we would love to do that and we will let you know. What was the last lockdown on your campus like last spring? And do you feel that the lessons learned will make life easier this fall? That's really interesting, actually. So yes, in terms of going into a new semester now, having just gone through a lockdown and having learned more about not just COVID, but also how your campus can adapt as a reflection, how do you think it will make things easier this coming fall? Who would like to take this question? The floor is yours, whoever would like to answer.
Do you want me to go?
Go for it.
Yeah, I'd say that we are far more prepared and far more knowledgeable about certain things around social distancing, safety than we've ever been before. I think thing came as a huge shock. Like everybody, we were getting around our daily business when we got the phone calls. We were watching the announcements by the Prime Minister that things were slowly beginning to restrict. And if we could work from home and if we could go home, we should. But what that has meant is the universities have invested more in online technology. Our professors have been working rigorously to make sure that all of those learning outcomes that can be replicated online are done so. We've looked at capacity in terms of lecture theatres. We've looked at timetabling even to make sure, like, for example, really important to be in your workshops for engineering workshops, and so that you're kind of, you know, doing what you need to with the equipment we have in our facilities. And that timetabling scheduling has also been planned for in the fall as well. But it's about preparing for both scenarios. So we feel like we are very well equipped than we were in comparison, but who knows what the future holds. And I think that's the caveat that Sarah gave you at the start of all of this, is that we still don't know what happens in the future, but learning from what happened in the spring, we've made sure that it has less of an impact in terms of teaching, learning, and socializing. And technology has played a big part of that role as well, in the use of Teams and use of kind of other social technologies to make sure that students feel like that they're engaging and still getting a good university experience. It would be my answer. Thank you.
Perfect, brilliant. I imagine that Matty's covered everything, but if there is anything else that you want to add, then please feel free.
Can I say that it's not even just the university, I would say the city that we're in has changed as well, and is more prepared now. In the course of lockdown, we have had bike lanes pop up everywhere. We have become a green city, which is really exciting. And I think that actually, yeah, as a destination, not just a university, and I'm sure that my colleagues would agree, there is just a better understanding of what needs to be done, of how to keep safe, so that not just on campus, but your whole experience is going to be more prepared than it would have been, you know, if you had been here a few months ago. So I really do think that we've all responded really well, and we've followed guidelines as a nation, which, you know, I guess we quite like rules and we like queuing, so it probably wasn't a difficult transition for us. But yeah, I would just say when you get here, it might not be the Britain that you saw a year ago if you'd come on holiday, for example. So I'm quite excited to see how it all comes together, but I'm an optimist. Let's see.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, well, I think we're almost at the end of the session now. So any last minute questions, please type now. But in the meantime, just to resume, we will send out this recording to you afterwards. If there is any questions that perhaps I've missed looking through the chat, please feel free to send either me an email directly or get in touch with my colleague Leo. I know a lot of you have her contact details, and I will of course help you. We will help you, you know, with any questions you have. In terms of the possibility of another Q&A, we'll see kind of how things evolve. The universities, I know, are also sending out students a lot of emails with updates in addition to updating their website, and we have complete confidence that, well, not even confidence, but we know 100% they will be doing everything they can to make sure that you arrive safely and that you can still absolutely maximise not just your first couple of weeks studying at the university, but your entire time at the university. Okay, Brilliant. If we don't have any last questions then, I think that'll be us finishing for today. But thank you very much for attending this webinar. We really hope that it's been useful for you as well. All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.